Can I run my CPU at 100% usage for a long time? I have a Dell XPS 15 9570, 32 GB RAM, 2.2 GHz and 6 cores. When I use an application, the parsen command on MATLAB, for more details, then my fan starts running fast. During this my PC doesn't seem to be heating, but it never got this noisy in the past, so it got me worried. In my task manager, the CPU usage shows 100% when this application is running. Is it a problem for the life of laptop if I run the PC at CPU 100% for like 4 hours in a day? Do I need to be worried about the noisy fan during the application?
Dr. Issues like overheating and excessive wearing can be important considerations for computers that handle heavier loads. A lot of folks do run their computers continuously at 100%. This is common practice in computational work, for example with engineering simulations or data analysis. There are two common things to watch out for. Overheating. Is your CPU, motherboard, RAM, disk, etc. getting too hot? Excessive wearing. Is a piece of hardware that can get worn out being used too much. For example, some consumer disk drives aren't made to be constantly reading/writing data. Overheating issues. CPU overheating. In most cases, most heat will come from your CPU, which will likely be the concern. If you're observing 100% CPU usage, which is different from 100% GPU usage, 100% disk usage, 100% network usage, etc. So monitoring the CPU temperature is usually the initial focus. Motherboard overheating. A related issue is the motherboard's temperature. A lot of folks ignore it and assume that it's probably fine as long as the other hardware temperatures are in control, which seems to be a reasonable guesstimate, in most cases so long as there's also good air circulation inside of the box. This can be more dubious in the case of compact devices, for example laptops. CPU overheating. CPU temperatures can be a big issue for folks who make heavy use of the CPU, including gamers, graphics professionals, and those who use CPUs as computational coprocessors. I think I've seen even little flash games in a browser go hard on a CPU, presumably due to inefficiency. RAM memory overheating. RAM memory temperatures can be an issue especially with highly overclocked RAM. Some vendors will sell fans with their high-frequency RAM for this reason. Disk overheating. Some disk drives, for example 15,000 revolutions per minute hard disks, can have trouble with overheating. I haven't heard of overheating being a big problem with most lower-speed hard disk drives, HDDs, and solid-state drives, SSDs. There are other heats that one might watch out for. For example, a heavily used server might watch out for heating on its network card, while a computer with an embedded radio device might watch out there, but those seem to be less common sources of concern for typical users. Two. Excessive wearing issues. Disk wearing. Most, I think. Disk drives aren't made to be continuously used at max capacity. So if you have an app that's constantly maxing out a disk drive, for example if it's constantly rewriting log files, then that might be something to check into. Servers and professional workstations often have disk drives designed to handle heavier loads. Fan wearing. Cooling fans continuously running at max might get worn out. A complicating issue with fans can be that if one wears out, but you don't notice it or monitor the related temperatures, then something might get excessively hot before the fan's failure is noticed. Power supply unit, CPU, wearing can also be an issue. Discussion. If your CPU is running at 100% in short bursts, I wouldn't typically be too concerned by that in most cases. If it's a common thing for your computer, especially over long time periods, you may want to understand the associated heat and wear issues. Professional users, gamers, and other power users often design their own computers specific to their anticipated usage.
In theory, so long as a computer can keep itself within tolerance as to temperatures, then it should be able to do that forever. In practice, laptops tend to struggle with the keeping cool part, and even some desktops have poor airflow characteristics which will result in long-term heat buildup. If your machine can stay within tolerance, then all you are really doing is shortening the life of the fans.
There's nothing to worry about, but download Intel Extreme Tuning Utility and see if you're getting throttled. It shouldn't normally be a problem on that specific laptop, but there are power limits as well as hard thermal limits. On my laptop, for example, I can run 100% CPU all day long at 2.0 GHz. But if I let it spike up to 2.2 GHz or higher, within a couple minutes I start getting throttled due to power limiting, and then my laptop drops itself down to 400 MHz. From what I've read, this is common across several manufacturers on the 14 inches class laptops. The point being, it's counterintuitive, but sometimes you can get that workload done faster by lowering your limits. Use Stu to find out for your specific use case.
Not entirely without worries. Though I guess you can probably do it, if you don't plan to do it for months. There are different aspects to consider, the most important one for this particular notebook being that its cooling is rather insufficient for that purpose, so it will get hot, generally an issue with notebooks, they're not designed for that purpose. If you Google for example stress test, you will find that under high load the CPU reaches around 90 to 92 degrees Celsius, which is acceptable, and throttles down to 1.5 GHz. The notebook itself reaches peak temperatures on the outside of 50 to 55 degrees Celsius. Which is, well, not that awesome. If it has that temperature on the outside, then that necessarily means it has that temperature, and presumably another 3 to 5 degrees Celsius more, on the inside, too. For some components, the CPU, notably, that's a total non-issue, but for other components, it's not so awesome if a long life is desired. So, yes, this may be a problem. Other issues with very high loads over long time that one might in general have to consider is the cooler fan's lifetime. Running at max speed all the time, and generally the CPU overheating, used to be an issue especially with cheapish cooling, but modern CPUs make this problem almost non-existent by throttling down accordingly. Another issue for very high loads on laptops in general is the, usually cheap, power supply unit running somewhat on the upper end and croaking after short time. That shouldn't be an issue with this particular notebook since its CPU is designed to accommodate not just the CPU but also the GTX 1050 Ti, which is idle during MATLAB use, and if the specs are truthful should be at around 40% load only. Also, even when operating within thermal limits, there is degradation which is proportional with use, although whether your CPU lives 35 years or 17 years probably makes no practical difference, since a capacitor on your motherboard will die long before that time anyway, or something else.